Police officers of Reddit, have you ever had an all units call? And if so, what happened? I was doing a ride along in college in a fairly small city in GA when we got an all available units call. The address came in, the lights and siren went on, and we were hauling butt at about 120 mph across town. I had no idea where we were headed until we got there. The only thing the officer said to me was, no matter what happens, stay in the fricking car. If you see anyone with a gun, call it out on the radio like this. Showed me, if any of us get shot, call it in and stay in the car. Then, he took a deep breath, calmly got out of the car, and took off at a sprint towards a 40-person melee in front of the only strip club in town. We were the first car there. Over the course of the next 30 seconds, officers arrived and kept coming until they outnumbered the people fighting. The officer I was riding with was completely on his own for a 10-second eternity and was able to rip about 10 people apart from fighting before backup arrived. It was the single bravest and most humbling thing I've ever seen with my own eyes. When it was all over, he got back in the car with 3 drunk and beaten up dudes in the back, turned to me and said, "So when you gonna sign up? I've got a couple more stories from that summer doing ride-alongs if anyone wants to hear." 25 years ago, smallish rural town. My dad is a beat cop on patrol. My cat brings in a live mouse and is playing with it in the kitchen, and my mom is deathly afraid of rodents. So she calls dispatch and tells them my dad needs to come home. Dispatch gets on the line and tells my dad to switch to a secured line. There's an emergency at home. My dad's driving home to take care of the issue when all of the cops, probably like 4 of my small town on patrol, come with sirens and lights blazing on my house because all they heard was there was an emergency at my dad's house. My mother was mortified. "Dang it, Martha, you can't keep doing this." Years ago, friend of mine was a dispatcher for the county he covered, sheriff, EMS and fire communications, and also worked with communicating with other agencies as well. From the state troopers, he got some sort of text communication, not a phone text as was before that was a thing, and it referred to an accident with injuries at the intersection of I-40 and Business 85. Something along the lines of collision I-40 bus 85 injuries involved. The way it was abbreviated and written made him misread it. Instead of an accident at 85 Business, he thought there was a bus collision on I-40, with 85 people injured. He dispatched every dang fire truck and ambulance the county had. They show up and it's a 2-car wreck with minor injuries. Lol, that is unfortunate for him but hilarious imagining the holy crap moment he would have had from reading it. Former cop here. The all units call was basically a riot at a large nightclub in a very rough area of the neighboring city. Once things were finally calmed down and the dozen or so people were taken away and my boss wanted us all back in our city, I was amazed at not only how many cops showed up but from where, counties and towns I had never heard of before. I looked up a few at the end of shift and some came from an hour plus away. I'm shocked the fight went on long enough for them to drive an hour there. Fighting is freaking tiring. So, I interned at the local PD at a time when all stations received new radio devices. The new devices looked a bit like old cell phones and had a bright orange panic button on top. It was meant for situations where, for example, a single police officer was attacked and needed help. Pushing that button resulted in all communication on the standard channel 1 being turned to one-way communication only. So all units would listen to what's going on wherever the panic button was pressed, and an automatic all free units call. All other units had to switch to the much weaker channel 2 to communicate, but channel 2 only allowed one device to speak. So either dispatch or car 1 or car 2 etc. could talk, but not multiple people at the same time like on channel 1. To disable the panic mode, you had to push the bright orange button in a certain way. Think of holding it for 3 seconds followed by 4 quick pushes. It could not be done remotely. This happened in a rather large city where some police stations are closed at night, usually the ones in the suburbs where few calls come in. That night, an older PO closed down the remotest station in the suburbs and decided to shut off the radio devices. You guessed it. He pushed the panic button on top because he thought that's where the devices were to be turned on and off. Without realizing what he did, he locked the station and went home. Since it was the first day of using the new radio devices, quite a few officers were unsure how to turn to channel 2. Basically, all communication was blocked. Cue panic everywhere with frantic cell phone calls to dispatch, and dispatch trying to figure out who closed that station, and thus had one of the only keys to open it, so the panic mode could be disabled. This unintentional all units call turned into an actual no units can call, though quite a few units were busy trying to resolve the situation. Good intentions but horrendously poor execution on the radio maker's part. Former Royal Canadian Mounted Police here in a small tourist town was working on a regular mid-weekday shift when we received a dispatched call for a bomb threat in the industrial commercial sector of the town. We all went there, called in the bomb squad, the dogs, got people out of the area, and so on. We were doing roadside when we got another call that the local bank's silent alarm was turned on. Now, we are in Canada, in a tourist town. Things are usually relatively calm, but this was absolutely chaotic. We got the all unit call. They call our neighboring detachment to help. We all split and head to the bank. We arrive. Around 20 some patrol cars all around. There to see all bank employees bounded and gagged. Smoke everywhere from smoke bombs. We realize very quickly that the bomb threat was the diversion. We immediately got a bolo out to get the 3 males, identified by the bank staff, including a former bank employee. We get the bolo out to CPIC, got words to airports and border crossings. We managed to catch 2/3 of the guys. The last one flew back to his home country, was in Canada on a student visa. We remained on high alert for days after this, looking for the third guy. Canadian authorities worked with their colleagues from the other guy's country to get him extradited almost a year later. In the end, as I recall, about $130,000 were missing and never recovered. For most of us, it was the first time we had a bomb threatened or a robbery. First time we were guarding an area, expecting to be shot at from an unknown location. The robbers were reported to have AK-47 type looking weapons. Edit 1. Bolo. Be on the lookout for CPIC. Canadian Police Information Center. Edit 2. Changed deported by extradited. NB. I won't name the town or the country involved. Holy frick. That sounds like a movie, or an episode of Flashpoint, because, you know, Canada. Usually about once a month or so, we're taught that if you need backup, if shoot's hitting the fan, call it in and worry about how many people come later. A unit was on patrol 2 weeks ago and some guy just started shooting at him. All the unit got out was 34th Saint. 10-33 I'm taking fire. 10-33 being the code for send the cavalry officer in need of assistance. It all ended fine. We caught the guy, no injuries, but you better believe every officer in our area dropped what they were doing and went. Another recent one, a mini riot broke out at a candle vigil for a murder victim. An officer stepped in alone, bad move, to stop the fight, and started getting his butt handed to him. All he said was Potomac, 10-33 but it worked. We came in, dispersed the crowd, and got out. Edit. Good chance to rant about a pet peeve of mine. When a 1033 goes out, there are always a few units who block the air with useless chatter. Hold me responding what's their location dispatcher, I'll come back to my current assignment later. Do they need a rifle on scene? It drives me crazy. Get off the radio and leave the air clear for the unit fighting for their lives. And every unit not on something absolutely necessary is required to respond. Why would you waste time to say you're going? No crap, you're going. The potentially deadly version of the company-wide reply all. I remember listening to an episode of This American Life where an officer accidentally locked himself in the back of his car when he went to take a nap. He left his radio in the front, so he called dispatch and was like, "Don't make this a big thing. Just send one unit to me," and then dispatch proceeded to call out the code for officer down. So then he heard a bunch of cars put on their sirens and raced at him. I got run over by someone fleeing the scene of an incident that they weren't involved in. He just got scared and apparently had a gun on him. I was out of my car talking to the person who called and my partner was trying to stop the person who was really called on. So he didn't even see me get hit. No one knew I got hit or where I was because my radio went flying. Luckily there was a lot of witnesses who called 911 and found my radio. I confused the dispatcher because I was in so much shock that I came over radio taking like I normally do. But I was bleeding badly from my head and broke my leg. I didn't feel the pain for about 2 hours. So I had that call come out because of me. I'm also pretty sure a policy got made because of me too. Happens all the time. Officer S. in a fight. Possible subject with a gun. Major traffic accident. It's not anything like the movies. If it's a big enough incident, all your available units are going to be going. I work as a police communicator at a local university. Usually an all units call is a fire alarm at one of the buildings. However, most of the time it's a false alarm and someone just burnt the popcorn at the lounge. One morning at work we were evacuated from a rather large office building, 50 plus floors, in New York City. Fire alarms went off on 3 floors because someone burned their popcorn in the microwave. That person will never live it down. Obligatory, not a cop, but I once got a all unit called to my house. Backstory: my mom was dating a rimhead and everyone knew who he was and our address. I was around 15 and one night he went off the rails and was beating the crap out of my mom. I got involved just in time to see him swing at my sister, who was 7 at the time. I ran for the phone and called it in. I got as far as the address when he grabbed me by the neck and threw me. Well, the dispatcher heard my garbled yelp and called it in as a possible homicide in progress. That combined with his reputation sent every single cop in the surrounding jurisdictions came flying our way. By the end of it I think there was 20 plus police officers at our house. I ended up hitting him with my mom's cast iron skillet to keep him there just as the first officer showed up. He was super cool about it and pretended he didn't see a thing. It was a terrible night and my mom was mad at me for months. But man, you don't frick with my little sister. We have calls almost daily that kind of meet this requirement. We have patrol sectors, each with a 2-man cruiser and a 1-man cruiser. The 2-man cars handle the high priority calls and the 1-man cars handle the more mundane stuff. So when a call comes in like shots fired, both sector cars go and usually other sector cars start radioing and that they are also responding. I do remember one night at midnight, which is shift change, we had a 2-man unit that shot a guy who pulled out a gun on them. You could hear gunshots over the radio and the car calling for help. The dispatcher kinda stumbled a bit, then said everybody go, everybody go. Was a military police officer on a rather large base. I was getting off shift and being transported back to my barracks by the guys coming on shift so I could check in my weapon. Suddenly we got a call for all units to respond to a section of base housing. A military wife was having an affair with another soldier while her husband was on deployment. Supposedly the husband was due to return soon, so she tried to break it off with the other guy. He responded by stabbing her several times. My team leader and I searched the tree line with our weapons drawn. Cause he's armed and it's dark outside, yeah no. I actually passed the guy with my team leader a few yards behind me and suddenly he comes out saying, "You're looking for me." Scared the crap out of me. My team leader covered him while I went in for the handcuffing, making sure that I had my knee firmly planted in between his shoulder blades and thoroughly covering his upper torso into the muddy terrain. Not sure what happened after that. He was taken to a holding cell by another squad and I got to go home. Ended up getting transferred from that base a few months later, but I know the wife survived the wounds. Too many examples. London riots. Unit attacked with a machete. Large group fighting with knives. Building fires. So on and so forth. Happened to my dad when he was stationed overseas. There was an airshow disaster in Germany and he was already there, so he was one of the first to respond. He struggles from it still. Fireworks and barbecues remind him of the smell of burning flesh that day. Not cop, but hopefully relevant. I was at one of the lakefront beaches in Chicago a few summers ago when, according to news report later, a party 1/4 mile down the trail started getting out of hand. Apparently party got way overcrowded, so a pair of cops rolled up in a squad car to get the mariachi band to quit, in hopes of folks losing interest and dispersing. This was a no-go and crowd responded by, among other things, breaking the squad car windows and surging in around the cops, one of whom put out an "oh crap" call. I don't know the details, but apparently Chicago cops have a code that basically means drop whatever you're doing and get the frick over here, because within 90 seconds Wilson Harvey looked, I crap you not, like that epic car chase at the end of the Blues Brothers. If I had to guess, must have been at least 50 cars hauling butt down onto the lakefront, one after the other, like a high-speed parade of cop cars celebrating "we're gonna frick you up then arrest everybody" day, which, basically, it was. My dad was a PAPD officer for 30 years. 2 times he had all units calls. First was the 1993 WTC bombing. The second was the 9th of November 2001. If he didn't pass away from an illness related to his time at the WTC site in 01, he'd be able to convey his impressions of that day better than I could. I recently found his handwritten notes from that night. They were jumbled together on his notepad in placemats from a diner in the area. I would urge you to put those notes together and see about publishing them online. I really love history, and 9/11 is going to be one of those things that people are going to be talking about for the next couple hundred years. First-hand accounts are vital, so I'd really encourage you to put those notes together. Not a cop but former practicing journalist, current PR person, got a text about a shooting. Turned out a cop made a stop, got shot in the neck by the passenger, killed the passenger and shot the driver. Driver got away. Cops from the 2 adjoining cities came. Sheriff's deputies, airport police, and university police all came out in under 3 minutes. About 150 cops. Within 30 minutes, marshals, FBI, and ATF were there as well. Largest response I've ever seen. There were rounds that had been fired into the buildings surrounding the area. It was a mess. I was in the wrong place at the right time, I guess. Last story I ever did. Made the full-time switch to PR. Edit. The cop survived. My father was a highway federal officer. Federal de Caminos. Rough translation. Here in Mexico. They were armed with light machine guns of standard caliber because crap goes real against the cartels here in the northern border. But it's so big and spaced out you have to deal with it yourself, cause the nearest unit can be 1+ hour away and they have reinforced trucks. Anyway, he once told me that he encountered a convoy of 3 Humvees while he was on the side of the road relatively hidden. He opened fire at the first Humvee's tires and it loses control. The other 2 brake and like 12 dudes with Kalashnikovs come out to fire in random directions they probably didn't saw where they got shot from. And my father lays down suppressing fire on them until 2 units come from each side of the road from a relatively nearby station to arrest what's left of them. Holy crap, your dad's gotta be some type of badass to be patrolling for fricking cartel members. Never a policeman, but I used to work in the security industry. I was quite well known by the local officers and had quite a few dealings with them, both in and out of work. One day I got a call on my mobile phone while on duty. Bit odd. It was the local custody sergeant. Apparently there had been a call that a child was being attacked in some woodland next to my site. I was being asked to run to the site of the report as I would be there first. A good 2 or 3 minutes in front of the police. I went, and pretty soon was scouring this little woods for anyone I could find. The whole time crapping myself. What if I find someone doing something to a kid? What do? I probably shouldn't kill him. Could I not? Could I just frighten him off the kid and take control there? Would I be able to control my anger? All those thoughts happened in a flash. Plus more. I did a few frantic laps of this place before hearing cars pulling up behind me, outside the wood. Next thing there was the entire local police force in there with me. We never found anyone. No sign. Horrible moment. Also, the first and only cavalry charge I've ever seen was in Brooklyn. There was this ride on W12 and Bowery in Coney Island in the late 80s called the Polar Express. You've all seen it. It's that ride that goes really fast around, then it goes backwards while blasting really loud music. Stupid, but whatever. This also attracted every brokies in Brooklyn who couldn't afford to get into a club, or were thrown out of all of them on weekends, and it was always a freaking nightmare. There were always fights, but you learned to let them tire themselves out a bit before you waded in because things could get ugly. I was detailed to this thing with a small army of other rookie cops on 4th of July weekend. We were told in no uncertain terms not to go into the crowd, ever. Nothing is happening in there that's worth your safety. So of course a brawl breaks out and someone immediately goes running in. Now please understand, you have to go now. You can't leave the other guy alone, even if he did frick up. The crowd parts for us like Moses parting the Red Sea, and then it closes in on us and the airmail, rocks and bottles come sailing. We pretty much go back to back ALA 300, but we are vastly outnumbered and out inebriated. We're fighting our way out and there's backup trying to fight its way in to get to us, but it's taking time, and I don't know if you've ever literally fought for your life, but it is freaking tiring. That adrenaline jolt only buys you so much time. Then I saw it. A flying wedge formation of mounted charging down West 12th into the crowd at full speed with the sergeant in the middle with his nightstick held out like he was ordering a charge and a shit-eating grin that said he had waited his entire life for this. I think the horse was smiling, too. You'll hear the term crash a lot and it's hyperbole. Not here. No, these guys crashed into this riot and sent bodies flying everywhere, like the bow of a great warship cutting through a stormy sea. A blue, black leather and roan battleship. The crowd dispersed in about 3 minutes flat, equally as stunned by what they just saw as honestly the foot cops were. I know sometimes people be about the cost of maintaining mounted police units because they're seen as unnecessary backdrop for tourist photos, and oh my god, I am living proof that they are so much more valuable than that. Buddy's first day on the phone at a fire station in an international airport. Airliner detects a fire in the rear by the generator. They are coming in hot and need assistance immediately. Buddy decides a major airliner incident is imminent. Calls the city fire department, which might have 80 fire stations. They all send every unit, expecting complete mayhem. Airplane lands safely. False alarm. 200 fire trucks are lined up for miles outside the airport. No one was able to get in because the gate was closed. My rookie friend botched his all units call. Edit. It was a false alarm. Not sure if that's clear. To be fair, I'd think that an airplane on fire would merit a pretty serious response. One that stands out was a chase which ended with a crash. 3 dead people and a trunk full of guns and drugs. But there's robberies, pursuit assists, and man with gun calls, all of which usually get opened up depending on the situation. And always, officer down, or needs immediate assistance. 10-24, if you're close especially. They hit that button or shots start going off, I'm dropping everything, grabbing my 416 and traveling light speed and coming in with everything I got. I'm not a police officer, but back when I was a reporter, I had to write up a fun little story for the paper. The local university had a Greek week in which all the frats and sororities would compete for charity. At the end of the week they'd gather together and carpool over to the local drive-in. Normally the campus required any gathering of more than a dozen or so people be registered so that they could send an officer to monitor for underage drinking. But because this wasn't an official party, no one bothered to tell the campus police. The plan was to go elsewhere. Sure enough, the neighbors complained about an unauthorized party as there were maybe a few dozen kids milling about loading up for the carpool. So a couple of the campus police were sent over to move the kids along. When they get there, there's kids everywhere and they're talking crap to cops. They thought it was ridiculous that someone called the cops on a carpool. One of the officers then slipped on a beer bottle while walking to the frat house, but his partner didn't see why he had fallen. He heard a crash and sees his senior partner on the ground. Thinking his partner had been hit by a thrown bottle, he rushed over to the cruiser and called in for backup. But he was relatively green and made several little mistakes. Instead of using normal language, he decided to use codes. Instead of saying, "Hey, we're clearing out that unauthorized party and could use a couple more officers," he used the codes for riot in progress, officers down on the scene, need immediate backup, and instead of using the campus police only band, they used the shared county band. Well, riot in progress, officers down, is apparently something dispatchers take a little seriously. An all units call was then immediately repeated by the 4 adjacent counties plus most of the individual cities and towns. Ultimately, a couple hundred cars screamed their way to campus. Cooler heads eventually prevailed, but not until a few hundred cops from about a dozen departments had donned their anti-riot gear, fired tear gas into a crowd that had no idea that they were rioting, and had detained everyone in a 2-block radius. Without realizing or intending to, the rookie had summoned nearly every officer in a 50-mile radius. A friend of mine was a K9 cop with a local small police department. He was a solid guy, but, by his own admission, wasn't the brightest. As an example, he couldn't learn the German commands for the dog, so they had to teach the dog English. Anyway, one day an all call or whatever it's called came in. It was regarding a shooting. which is rare here. My friend was taking a dump at the time and his dog was in his SUV K9 mobile. The cops went running out and jumped in whatever car was available. The K9 was in the back seat. When some other cop jumped in the SUV, the K9 got spooked and clamped down on the cop's neck. He freaked out and started screaming into his radio. All the other cops thought he'd arrived at the scene and been shot. My friend, hearing on the radio and knowing how his dog acts, ran out of the bathroom pulling his pants up. Havoc ensued. If I were a cop, I'd want to work for a small police department. Not a police officer, but I had an incident where 20 police cars were in my neighborhood the day my mom passed away. They wouldn't let us see her until after the autopsy came back and she had a heart attack. My entire house was filled and it was a decent sized house. One was sitting in my gaming chair looking through things. Like, dude, you're not gonna find anything on a 14-year-old girl's desk. It was around 9 AM when I found her, and by the time they all left it was close to 11 PM. TLDR. My mom died and police stayed for almost 14 hours. I served in West Belfast, Northern Ireland. Due to the high threat level in my division, we would patrol in 2 armored Land Rovers, each with minimum 3 armed officers, one of which would have an assault rifle or SMG. Basically, we could handle most scenarios. One day, however, our vehicle was in an intentional head-on collision with a stolen car, as it was driving towards local children playing in the street. This resulted in our front wheel arch bending to the point the vehicle could travel no more. In a few minutes, the community we were there to protect turned against us. It was like Black Hawk Down. A few hundred people came out of the woodwork when they realized we were an easy target. Petrol bombs and bricks rained on top of us as we attempted to pursue the car thief on foot. We jumped in the back of our vehicle and called for assistance. In under 5 minutes, a fleet of approximately 5 to 6 armored Land Rovers appeared from the neighboring division and drove the crowd back. They managed to tow us to safety and we lived to get bricked another day. There was a high-speed chase and the officer overcorrected a turn and crashed into a light pole and median barrier. His car caught on fire. Between the light pole, barrier, and his own car, he was pinned inside and nobody could get him out because of the fire. So all units had to watch him burn and scream. By time they got a fire truck out and put out the fire and untangled him, he was dead. That was one of my dad's best friends and it was the first time I saw my dad cry out of sadness. This mouse is looking for friends in the comments. Comment mouse boy to befriend him. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.